All right, some tips. Let's do this. They still haven't gotten this sorted, which is annoying. Sydney, Brisbane, Hawthorn, Geelong, Port, Brisbane. Okay. Obviously got one game wrong last week, so I expected this to be Sydney Hawthorn, but we got Sydney Port. It's fine. Still a good game regardless. That's the beauty of having the best teams play off in a final series. They're all very good at football. Um, let's start with Sydney Port because it is the first game of the weekend. Two big things to keep in mind with this game. First is Port Adelaide's record against Sydney traditionally. Have not lost, I believe, to Sydney in 8 years. I think that's the time period. The second thing to keep in mind is that the last time they played, Port Adelaide won by well over 100 points. I think it was 112. So, with those two things in mind, Port will probably have a lot of confidence coming into this game. On the other side of the token, with the Swans, it's what I talked about last week. So I think what they got out of that Giants game more than any other game this season is so important. And it would link back to other games they've played this year as well, where they've been sort of on the back foot, not started the game the way they wanted to, and pushed late, and their class has dragged them over the line. Because they're a very classy team, the Swans. What they take out of that game is it's very cliche, but they take a never say die attitude out of that game, and they will never back down. I think that's the kind of team Sydney are now, and have been at many points this year. They just don't back off at all. Because when they're down by 4 goals, and especially after that Giants game where it was probably the most prominent example of it all year, they will always know that they're in with a chance if they're down. So Port are really going to have to put the hurt on them to see out the game, in my opinion. If Port are taking a 4 goal lead into three-quarter time, it's not enough. It's not enough. They need to really put the hurt on this Swans team. Granted, as we said, the Swans' history against Port is not great, and we aren't really sure what kind of effect that last game where they lost by over 100 points will have on them playing Port again. All that said, I think it feels wrong to not back Sydney in here. Because I still think out of the teams that are left, they've been the best team all year. I still think they play the most exciting brand of football. I still think that the mentality that this team carries now is just head and shoulders above the rest. And I still think that the best teams always know how to get the job done, and they are the definition of that to a T. So until they prove me wrong, I have to back Sydney in here. Geelong Brisbane is a much harder game to predict, in my opinion. There are probably a lot more variables in Sydney Port Adelaide that you have to consider, but this is much harder to predict. You've got two teams in this preliminary final that, at different points in the year, have been premiership favourite, but they've also both shown a level of inconsistency. And that makes it difficult because I'm not sure you can predict which Geelong or which Brisbane will come out on the day. Because if it's the Brisbane from the last quarter the other night, it's a done deal. If it's the Geelong that played against Port Adelaide, it's a done deal their way. If it's the Geelong from the start of the season, it's probably Geelong's game to win because they were arguably the best team in it at the start of the year. If it's the Brisbane from the second half of the year, where they climb from bottom four contention to top four contention, like there are so many different possibilities in terms of what teams are coming out on the night. What I will say, and I said this about Brisbane last week when they beat us, is that the level of momentum that comes out of performances like that, and granted the two performances were very different, obviously against Carlton, they really put the hurt on us, backed off a little bit, and cruised out the game, and it was probably a very enjoyable win to pick up in a different sense. Whereas the Giants game, they just really grinded out the win. It was a very different kind of win, but also one that you can take a lot of momentum from. And so, in the same way that I said it last week, I think they're going to be ready. I think they're going to be so ready to give this game a crack. In saying that, Geelong will probably have Tom Stewart back, might have Sam De Koning back in the side. So their defense is going to be locked and loaded. I think they were fantastic against Port Adelaide, so they're also going to take a lot of momentum in. MCG, Saturday twilight. Brisbane have had their struggles playing away over many years under Chris Fagan. This feels like the exact kind of game that Brisbane need to win, in the sense that if they're about it, because this is a game that traditionally they haven't really won in the past, I think it'll feel a little bit failed as a whole if they weren't able to win this game. Because it feels like everything's been working towards this sort of game. They fell at the final hurdle last year. It almost feels like, even though it might not be their last chance, it almost feels like a last gasp effort at a premiership. And the way their away form sort of was a few years back, there's been a lot of development in that time. It just feels like they should be getting this done. And I think these two wins will do a lot for them. And I think they're going to win. There's a lot of feeling in this one. It could go either way. Like this one, I can sort of take a little bit more of a. This one, I can sort of take a little bit more of an analytical look at. But this one is like, it just feels like Brisbane should win. And that's why I'm tipping them. So my grand final is Sydney and Brisbane, which I think will be a cracker. But even if any combo of these teams, I think will be a really good game of football, in my opinion.